The leader of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, recently declared that Israel will be brought to justice and Turkey will make sure that Israel is brought to justice. He said, quote, Turkey will ensure that the perpetrators of genocide face justice. Being targeted by Zionist killers is not something to fear or be ashamed of, but rather it is a badge of honor that we wear on our chests with pride. The Zionists began to occupy the land with British support after the Ottoman Empire was forced to withdraw from the land of Palestine. Zionist gangs and terrorist organizations committed mass murder, expelled the Palestinians from their homes, and forcibly displaced them. So he's basically saying that the Ottoman Empire lost Palestine. Because of that, eventually the Zionists took control over Palestine, and the Palestinians have been suffering ever since then. And here's the question. How can Turkey bring Israel to justice unless Turkey defeats Israel in a war? And this is what Erdogan is implying here. He's implying that Turkey has to go to war against Israel, defeat Israel, and bring the Israelis to justice, and to bring justice for the Palestinians, to avenge the Palestinians and to save the Palestinians from the Zionists. And he's essentially saying that Turkey must revive the Ottoman Empire because the Ottoman Empire lost Palestine to the British. Turkey has to retake that territory that the Ottoman Empire lost. So he wants to revive Turkish power. He wants to revive Ottoman power. And by retaking Palestine, Turkey will undo the damage that the British caused. This is what Erdogan is arguing. And justice will be brought for the Palestinians. And justice will be imposed on the Zionists. This is what Erdogan is saying. And this is really all a reflection of what is happening in the world. The world is turning against Israel. It's not just the Islamic world. You have people who are not even Muslim who are turning their backs against Israel, and they are changing their minds in regard to Israel. You have people who are saying, I used to support Israel, but after seeing all these videos of dead kids, kids missing limbs, kids having to watch their mother's dead body in front of them, I have changed my mind on Israel. I do not like Israel anymore, etc., etc. And this view is becoming more and more popular. Even within the United States, the opinion about Israel is altering, not in Israel's favor, but against Israel. And so the tide is turning against Israel. This is what I was trying to say in my last video, not in my last video, but in one of my recent videos, about the end of the golden era for Israel. Israel had this golden era. After World War II, especially after the 6 Days War in the 1960s, Israel really, really enjoyed this golden era in which America was gung-ho for Israel, and Americans were absolutely enthusiastic, absolutely ecstatic about Israel. And that is changing. That is changing. And Erdogan is stating that Turkey must impose justice on Israel, basically saying Israel must be defeated in war. And a lot of people would look at Erdogan's words here and say that they support what Erdogan has said here. People who are not even Muslim would actually be inspired by what Erdogan has declared here. Now, you have people who come along and they say, well, if only Turkey was controlled by a secularist, right? They want a secular Turk to run Turkey. If only Turkey was controlled by a Kemalist, then things would be better. Now, who are the Kemalists? The Kemalists are people who follow the ideology and the vision of Kemal Ataturk.
The military leader who won his country's freedom, then built and ruled a modern Turkey, is dead. Elected to succeed him is General İsmet İnönü, the former premier. Under Ataturk's 15-year rule, Constantinople was renamed Istanbul and became a westernized city of modern, well-planned buildings. He banned harems, gave Turkish women suffrage at the polls, and equal educational opportunities under foreign teachers. Impatient with former methods, Ataturk banished ancient ways, substituting machinery in an oriental land. Under his one-party government, factories increased as he industrialized Turkey. The social revolution he accomplished was widespread. For the first time, girls mingled with boys in the schools, reading a Latin alphabet instead of the unwieldy Arabic.
Kemal Ataturk was the founder and the first leader of the Republic of Turkey, which was forged after World War I. At the end of World War I, Turkey, being the loser, was occupied by the British and the Greeks. At that time, Turkey was known as Anatolia. Historically, that region that we call Turkey today was known as Anatolia. It was originally inhabited by Greeks and Indo-Europeans, and these Indo-Europeans would eventually be Hellenized. They would eventually be integrated into Greek culture. And so Anatolia really became Greece. It was a part of the Greek world. It was a part of the Hellenic world. And eventually the Turks invaded Anatolia. They Turkified it and they Islamized it. And eventually it became the center for the Ottoman Empire. That empire crashed in World War I. Well, after the Ottoman Empire crashed and the sick man of Europe, as it was called, finally died, the British and the Greeks occupied Anatolia. Well, in comes Kemal Ataturk. He led an uprising against this occupation, and he defeated the Greeks, and he defeated the British. And so because of this, Ataturk is a hero in the collective conscience of Turkey, and he today enjoys this cult of personality. Ataturk is so famous in Turkey. He has this I don't want to say this divine status, but it's this near divine status. It is a cult of personality that is very, very powerful, very strong in Turkish society. Well, Ataturk was also extremely anti-Islam. And people would look at that and they would say, well, that's great, right? He was against Islam. This is amazing, right? So we want someone who follows Ataturk to control Turkey today because that person would be against Islam. Kemal Ataturk was a hardcore secularist, and he was also a Darwinist. He believed in the theory of evolution, and he was also someone who hated Islam. But here's the thing, he hated religion in general. And he also was one of the people behind the massacre of the Greeks in the Greek city of Smyrna. When it comes to Ataturk, very few people talk about this fact, but Kemal Ataturk was a butcher. He butchered the Greeks of Smyrna. So his anti-Islam sentiment did not hinder him from being a mass murderer. Because Ataturk was a part of a worldview that had become very popular at the end of the existence of the Ottoman Empire. This was the ideology of the Young Turks. The Young Turks were hardcore secularists. They were people who were very much so against religion, and they also hated Islam. And you could say, well, that's great. We want people like the Young Turks ruling Turkey because that means that it would be ran by people who hate Islam. But here is the thing. The Armenians made the same damn mistake as this. They made this very mistake. See, the Armenians, they thought that their biggest enemy was the Sultan. And at one point in time, it was. The Ottoman government under the Sultan committed horrendous massacres of the Armenian people. So the Armenians thought, well, we need a secular party to control the Ottoman Empire. We need secularists to control the Ottoman Empire. And so eventually the Young Turks overthrew the Sultan. They took control of the Ottoman Empire. And the Armenians thought, this is great. We have secularists who are controlling the Ottoman Empire. We're not going to suffer anymore. We're not going to have to endure this horrid persecution that we had to go through under the Sultan. But they were dead wrong. Because who orchestrated the Armenian genocide? It was the secularist. It was the Young Turks. So the people who the Armenians thought would be good for them ended up being the worst for them. And the people who orchestrated the greatest massacre of the Armenians in the history of the Armenian people were not Islamist. They were people who believed in evolution. They were people who were extremist when it came to secularism. They weren't people who read the Quran. They were people who were reading Darwin's Origin of Species. They were people who were reading Herbert Spencer, the one who coined the term survival of the fittest. These were hardcore eugenists. Yes, they were pro-Ottoman, they were secularist, and they were also eugenists. They were Darwinist, and they orchestrated the greatest massacre of the Armenian people in the history of the Armenian people. Because while they were against Islam, they were extremely pro-Ottoman. And they believed that all the ethnic groups living in the Ottoman Empire needed to be Ottomanized. So in the Ottoman Empire, you had Armenians, you had Greeks, you had Assyrians. And these people were resistant to Ottomanization. And the Young Turks wanted all the different peoples who were living within the Ottoman Empire to speak Turkish and to adopt Ottoman culture. The Armenians were not going to acquiesce. And so eventually the Young Turks said, okay, we're just going to genocide you. In the name of Ottomanism, and also within our demonic, Darwinistic worldview, we are going to butcher you because you are a threat to our species. You are a threat to the Ottoman race. Again, they saw things in Darwinistic ways. They saw things in Darwinistic terms. Just like how the Germans said that the Germans must protect their race in this world of survival of the fittest, the Jews and the blacks and these other people who are handicapped, people who are intellectually handicapped. These people are threats to the superior genetic makeup of the German race, and therefore we have to purge these people out. We have to exterminate them so that our people can dominate in this world of survival of the fittest. It was Darwinism. Same thing happened in the Armenian genocide. The Young Turks said, okay, we hate Islam. Oh, that's great. Yeah, but we believe in Darwinism. Do you see that? Do you see the evil that is in that ideology that so many people would not recognize? Because a lot of people are so hung up on Islam versus everyone else that they don't see the evil in everything else. There's other evils other than Islam. It's not just Islam. There's also Darwinism. There's also eugenics. There's also Nazism. It's not just Islam. And so people made the mistake in thinking that the Young Turks would have been more civil than the Sultan, and they were wrong. So people are making the same mistake today. They're saying if only Turkey was ran by a Kemalist or a secularist. Well, let's look at who the Kemalists are today. Because ever since the end of World War I, there has been this struggle between the Islamist and the Kemalist, the Islamist and the secularist. And this struggle still goes on today. And when the AK party took control over Turkey back in the early 2000s, there were Kemalists who were trying to overthrow the AK party. There was even this conspiracy known as Sledgehammer. It was this conspiracy being done by people who were in the security sector of Turkey. And they came up with this idea to bomb 2 mosques and then to accuse Greece of shooting down a Turkish airplane in order to cause so much chaos within Turkish society that it would give an opportunity to people within the security forces to overthrow the government and to thereby overthrow the AK party. Well, this didn't happen. And the people who were involved in this conspiracy, or allegedly involved in this conspiracy, were arrested. And hundreds of people actually were arrested as a result of 2 different high-level cases. One was the Sledgehammer case. Another one was a case in regards to the Ergenekon organization. The Ergenekon was a nationalist, secularist organization that was against the AK party. And the government arrested people who were a part of that organization. So because of the trials in regards to the Ergenekon and to Operation Sledgehammer, hundreds of people were arrested. And so this was all a reflection of the struggle between the Islamist and the Kemalist. And this was also the AK party, led by Erdogan, curbing the power of the Kemalist. But here's the thing, nationalism is still very, very strong within Turkey. And this culture of nationalism and Kemalism is so strong that the AK party has to be in a coalition with a Kemalist party called the MHP. The MHP. Now, let's talk a little bit about the MHP. And I wrote down some notes here because I can't remember all this stuff. But the MHP is an acronym for, in English, the Nationalist Movement Party. This is a Islamo-Kemalist party. So here you have Kemalists who are in a coalition. They are in cahoots with the AK party. So people think that working with the Kemalists is the answer, or supporting the Kemalists is the answer in Turkey. But Kemalists will actually work with the Islamists. Do you know when this also happened? When a similar thing happened? When you had Kemalists cooperating with Islamists? The Armenian Genocide. This happened during the Armenian Genocide. Who orchestrated the Armenian Genocide? It was the secularists, whose ideology would be carried on by Kemal Ataturk. I said Kemalist earlier, but I meant to say secularist. You had secularists, the Young Turks, who orchestrated the Armenian Genocide. Who did the butchery? Who did the dirty work? It was the Islamist. So the secularist in the Ottoman Empire used the Muslims/Islamists to butcher the Christians. So they worked together in butchering people. Well, who's to say that this can't happen again? Who's to say that the same thing cannot happen again in the future when it comes to Armenia today, when it comes to Israel? I mean, we got a sample of this already a number of years ago in Azerbaijan, in the war in Azerbaijan between the Azeris and the Armenians. And what happened in 2020? The Armenians were defeated by the Azeris with the help of the Turkish government, ruled by who? The AK and the nationalists. Nagorno-Karabakh, that was the region that the Azeris and the Armenians were fighting over, and they're still struggling over this. And right now you have Erdogan saying, well, Israel has to be brought to justice. Well, how can that be possible without a war? How can that be possible without military involvement? Now, people will say, well, we need the CHP. The CHP is the secularist Kemalist party today that is the main opposition to the AK party. But if you look at the leader of the CHP, he himself has declared recently that he stands with the Palestinians. So it doesn't matter who runs Turkey. Whoever runs Turkey is going to be anti-Israel. Even if they are in cahoots with the CIA, and anyone who's going to control Turkey, if anyone is going to take power over Turkey, it has to be someone who, at least initially, is in good terms with the CIA. And if you look at the MHP party, who is in a coalition, which is in a coalition with the AK party, the MHP party has a very, very long history with the CIA. Go back to the Gladio operation that was done in Turkey during the Cold War. Let's talk a little bit about this. This is very, very fascinating. During the Cold War, Turkey was an extremely important country for NATO, geostrategically speaking, geopolitically speaking. Why was this? And why is this still the case? Well, until recently, until Finland was recently added to NATO just a number of months ago, Turkey was the easternmost part of the NATO sphere of influence, of the NATO sphere of power. And also, Turkey was the NATO member that was the closest to Russia. Now it's Finland, because Finland borders right with Russia. So now you got a country that borders right with Russia, up in the north, right there on Russia's Kola Peninsula, and it's a part of NATO. So now you have a NATO navy smack right next to Russia. It's a very, very dangerous situation. During the Cold War, and before Finland was added into NATO, Turkey was the NATO member closest to Russia. So geostrategically, geopolitically, Turkey has been very, very important for NATO. Also, Turkey has played a role as a balcony point for America's operations in the Middle East and also in the Caucasus, because it's right there. It's right there in between the Caucasus and the Middle East. It's that transition point between Europe and the Middle East. So again, very geostrategically important country for NATO. So during the Cold War, NATO, America, made sure that Turkey was the second most armed country in NATO. So basically, the Americans said, we're going to be number one when it comes to power and weaponry, but we're going to make sure that Turkey is number two in NATO. And America was very much so interested in using Turkey as a proxy against the Soviets. Turkey was the closest country for NATO was the closest country to Russia for NATO, so therefore they wanted to use Turkey as a proxy against the Soviets during the Cold War. Also during the Cold War, the CIA was working with Turkish nationalists. The CIA was working with the founder of the MHP. His name was Alp Arslan Turkis. He was a Turkish neo-Nazi. He read Mein Kampf, loved Adolf Hitler. He was an agent for the CIA. And he founded the MHP. And in the 1970s, Turkey had probably its most politically violent decade in the history of post-World War I Turkey. Because what was happening in the 1970s was you had right-wingers who were butchering left-wingers. And literally thousands of people were killed in the decade of the 70s in Turkey. It was probably the most politically turbulent time in the history of the modern Republic of Turkey, the modern state of the Republic of Turkey. And there was a guy who did an investigation on this violence. He wanted to know who was behind all this violence that was taking place. So in the 1970s, there was Ankara's deputy state attorney, Dojan Oez, who did an investigation on this, and he concluded, quote, military and civilian security services are behind all this work, and all these activities are guided by MHP members and cadres. And what happened to Mr. Oez in the 1970s? Well, he was found dead. And that was not a coincidence. He was murdered because he knew too much and his mouth was too big. So whoever is going to take control over Turkey has to be someone who is abiding by the CIA rules. Erdogan right now is being a little too friendly with the Russians. He's being a little too friendly with the Iranians. So he may just be gone for good and replaced with someone who is more warm towards what the CIA wants. Now, Erdogan has said that this is going to be his last term. So even if he's not assassinated, even if he's not found dead because of natural causes and they say that it wasn't an assassination, let's just say that his term ends and he just goes off into retirement and into obscurity. Whoever replaces Erdogan is going to have to be someone who abides by what the CIA wants, because the Turkish government is in cahoots with the intelligence agencies of NATO. And whoever takes control over Turkey after Erdogan is going to be someone who is against Israel. It doesn't matter if it's an Islamist. It doesn't matter if it's a Kemalist. It's going to be someone who's against Israel. Why do I say this? Well, for one, being anti-Israel is extremely common in Turkey. It is ubiquitous. It is a part of the culture. But also, it's very popular. It's very popular. So even if you have a politician who doesn't really care about being against Israel, he's going to be against Israel because that's what the people want, and political leaders are a reflection of the people who vote for them. And that's why even the leader of Erdogan's main opposition party, the MHP, has declared that he is with the Palestinians. So even if you have a Kemalist, I'm sorry to bust your bubble, all you people out there who are dying for a Kemalist government in Turkey, you will be disappointed. Because being anti-Israel is the norm in Turkey. Now, it's all really a part of the zeitgeist that is forming against Israel. And it's not just happening in the Islamic world, it's happening all over the world. All over the world, anti-Israel sentiment is becoming very, very popular. I was watching this conversation today between Bill Maher and Bill Burr, and the two comedians, the two Bills, were arguing about Israel. And they were talking about the university protests in favor for Palestine and against Israel. And Bill Burr said, I'm with the kids. And then Bill Maher went on to say, well, I don't want to see dead kids, but that's what happens when you have a terrorist attack and Israel has to do what it has to do. And he did it in a very smug way. He spoke in a very condescending and arrogant way, which is what Bill Maher does. That's how the guy talks. I mean, he is from the East Coast, so not surprising.
With the kids demonstrating for Hamas, they are in with the terrorists.
They were for the Palestinians.
Well, it's sort of the same cause. Why, are you?
I'm on the side of the kids.
Yeah, that's easy to say. You know, no one wants to see kids dead. This is a war.
That was very brave of you to say that.
This is a war. No, I'm the one who's actually brave on this.
Pat yourself on the back.
It's easy to say I'm for the kids. Who's not for the kids?
Well,
it comes down to real hard-nosed decisions. Like a country.
Stop talking like you're a general.
A country got attacked. Israel got attacked.
I'm not saying that they didn't have a right to go back. I'm just sitting there going like, how do I look at what?
We're the only country in the world that they get attacked, and then as soon as they counterattack, it's like, well, we got to stop this shit now. Don't attack them. There's a very simple solution to all this problem in the Middle East. Stop attacking Israel.
Hey, you
Stop
just solved
attacking
it.
Israel.
You just solved it.
I actually did.
There you go. That's fantastic.
Anyway.
All right.
We don't need to get onto that.
Let's go to Russia and the Ukraine. How do you solve that one, Bill? Let me hear your hard-nosed decision about that. Well, let me ask you a question. How is war still legal? With all this shit that's been canceled.
Legal.
Why is that still fucking legal?
Would you like a real answer to that? Because for something to be illegal, you have to have the capacity to enforce it. And you can't enforce against war, or else you have to go to war with the country that's going to war. And we don't want to go to war with Russia over Ukraine. What would be the sense of making it illegal? Oh, that's really going to stop Putin. No. To stop people from going to war, you have to also put boots.
You can't sit down and talk it out? Why can't Putin do a podcast with the head guy? Like, you just solved the Middle East on a podcast. Why can't they solve what they're doing on a podcast?
This is why this is not your thing.
Make some hard-nosed decisions. It's not your thing. It's what you...
It is my thing.
It isn't your thing.
This is not your thing.
You're like that guy that has a fantasy football team and thinks he's a fucking GM.
No.
But I watched multiple different uploads of the same conversation, and I read through the comment sections of all of the uploads. And one thing that I noticed was that the majority of the people in the comment sections were against Bill Maher and were for Bill Burr. And this is yet another example of what I'm talking about, an example of the zeitgeist that is forming against Israel. I also saw recently a debate between Norman Finkelstein and some settler from Israel, some settler whose name I do not remember. And yes, when I mean settler, I mean the guy actually lives in a settlement in a Palestinian territory. And the guy was very arrogant. He kept disrupting Norman Finkelstein, and Norman Finkelstein would try to talk, and then he would be disrupted, and then Norman Finkelstein would have this look on his face. And he would say, this was on Piers Morgan's show, Mr. Piers Morgan, if you're going to be the moderator, then be the moderator, please. I understand that a lot of people from Israel think that the entire world is the West Bank and that they can just control everything. This is not the West Bank. Mr. Morgan, if you're going to be a moderator, then be a moderator.
But I don't believe anybody seriously argues that Nagasaki was morally defensible.
Can we not get too much into World War II? Let's talk about our situation now.
Yes,
we got some serious things to deal with right now.
That's fine.
Let's get to it.
right. I'm trying to be.
Let's not get into academic mumbo jumbo. I understand, but let's get to it. The bottom line is that Israel is a tiny country. And if you look at the map, you'll see we're a tiny Jewish state within. That's right, but we got to get to it and not talk about Nagasaki or Hiroshima. What's the difference? The point is we're a tiny Jewish state within the Arab Muslim world, and if we don't defend ourselves, then we're an ethnic minority. We're an armed ethnic minority.
Let Norman Finkelstein respond, please.
Piers, you have to decide whether you're the moderator or he's the moderator.
No, I'm the moderator.
You asked me a question direct. Okay, well then I'm trying to be responsive to your question.
Yeah, I understand.
So, the 2 million Palestinians in Gaza were given about 70% of the land at that particular moment. Number two,
Norman, I just want you to know what I'm talking about from experience and not from Israel's theory. I was there. They talked to me.
Sir,
I was there.
You really have to act as peers. Many of these Israelis think the whole world is the West Bank and Gaza, where they get to control everything. So you really have to remind him that this is a civil conversation.
And I read through the comments, and everyone in the comments section is praising Norman Finkelstein and hating on the settler. The world is changing. And a lot of people would look at the statement of Erdogan in which he said, Turkey will ensure that the perpetrators of genocide face justice. In other words, saying Israel will be brought to justice by Turkey. A lot of people would look at this statement and say, you go, Erdogan. And they would look up to Turkey as a heroic nation against the genocidal Zionists. The world is changing. And the tide is turning against Israel. The tide is turning against Israel. And Jewish people always say never again when it comes to the Holocaust. I think there's going to be a massive, massive reverse of that way of thinking. Anyway, I'll end it at that. You guys just heard some theology. God bless.